The storm had ripped through the valley like a monster unleashed from the heavens. Trees lay broken across the winding country road, shingles and splintered boards scattered like forgotten dreams. The sun had just clawed its way through the thick gray clouds, casting thin beams of gold across the devastation. And in the middle of that quiet ruin, a man named Ryder Hale, a broad-shouldered biker with a face carved by time and regret, rode his Harley down the muddy road, the rumble of the engine echoing like thunder's aftershock. He wasn't supposed to be there. He wasn't supposed to care. But fate has a strange way of putting broken people in front of one another. As Ryder turned the corner near a small country lane, his headlight caught the sight of something that made him ease the throttle. There, at the edge of what once was a tidy little farmhouse, stood an old couple, their clothes soaked, hands trembling, faces pale from exhaustion. The roof of their home was gone, the barn flattened, and the small white fence lay twisted in the mud. Yet, even in their frailty, they were lifting shattered boards and trying to rebuild with what little strength they had left. The old man, his back bent with age, was hammering in silence. The woman beside him held a piece of wood steady with swollen hands. Ryder parked the Harley at the edge of the property, the engine crackling as it cooled. He just stood there, watching. Something stirred deep in him, something he hadn't felt in years. A memory, a ghost, a promise long buried. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and humanity's power to change, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Midnight Reports. Stories like this one deserve to be heard, because sometimes, one act of compassion can rewrite an entire life. Ryder watched the couple for a long moment before finally stepping off his bike. The leather of his jacket, painted with the roaring skull emblem of the Hells Angels, gleamed faintly in the new sunlight. He looked dangerous, intimidating, like someone who'd seen the darker corners of the world. And yet, when the old woman looked up, she didn't flinch. She just gave a small, polite smile, the kind only people who have lived through pain can still manage. He walked closer and said nothing for a while. The old man wiped his brow, looked up, and gave a cautious nod. Ryder finally spoke, his voice low and rough. "You folks trying to fix all this by yourselves?" The old man chuckled sadly. "Don't got much of a choice. Insurance ain't worth the paper it's written on, and my boy's out of state. We'll manage." Ryder's gaze swept over the wreckage, the splintered beams, the torn shingles, the sagging porch. He could see the hopelessness buried beneath the old man's steady hands. He remembered another man, years ago, his own father, trying to fix a broken home after Ryder's mother had died. He'd tried to help but had chosen a different road. A road that led to a gang patch, prison walls, and a lifetime of apologies that came too late. The old woman's voice trembled as she said, "We've lived here 47 years. We raised our children in this house. I just can't. I can't let it go." That was all it took. Something inside Ryder cracked open. He looked down at the mud-stained ground and whispered more to himself than to them, "Stop. I got this." At first, they didn't understand. The old man frowned. "Son, you don't have to," but Ryder was already peeling off his leather jacket and tossing it across the handlebars of his bike. The tattoos on his arms, faded skulls, flames, names, told the story of a man who'd seen too much. Yet, as he picked up the hammer from the old man's trembling hand, his expression changed. The hard lines of his face softened, replaced by something almost peaceful. For the next several hours, the quiet valley was filled with the sound of rebuilding. Ryder worked like a man possessed, lifting beams, nailing boards, hauling debris. Sweat poured down his temples, mud clung to his boots, but he didn't stop. Each swing of the hammer seemed to chip away at the anger that had lived in him for years. The couple tried to protest, but he just shook his head. "Go sit," he said gently. "Rest. I've done worse jobs than this." Word spread fast in that small town. A few neighbors came by, curious to see the biker who'd stopped to help the elderly Marshalls rebuild their home. Some recognized the patch on his jacket and whispered, others offered food and tools. By late afternoon, half the neighborhood had joined in. Ryder never asked for thanks, never gave his last name. He just worked. Every nail he drove into the new boards was a silent apology to the people he'd hurt, the bridges he'd burned. At one point, as he straightened a support beam, the old woman, Martha Marshall, brought him a glass of water. She looked at him with eyes that saw far deeper than appearances. "You remind me of my son," she said softly. He used to get that same look when he worked, like he was trying to build more than just walls. Ryder froze for a moment, his throat tightening. "Where's your boy now?" Her smile faded a little. "Lost him 10 years ago. Drunk driver. He was just 30. Ryder lowered his head. "I'm sorry." She nodded. "You can't carry guilt forever, son. Sometimes the best way to honor the past is to build something new for someone else." Those words hit him harder than the storm ever could. As the day turned golden and the shadows stretched long, the house began to take shape again, walls standing straight, the roof partly mended. The couple sat on the porch steps, watching as Ryder and the townsfolk worked side by side. Children handed nails, women painted, men lifted planks. It was more than a rebuild, it was redemption made visible. Ryder hadn't smiled in years, but when the old man patted him on the back and said, "You brought this whole town back to life, son," he couldn't help it. A rare, tired smile crossed his face. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the sky blazed with hues of orange and crimson, Ryder stood beside his Harley, ready to leave. His muscles ached, his clothes were torn, but his soul felt lighter than it had in decades. The couple came up to him, holding a small wooden cross they'd salvaged from the wreckage. Martha pressed it into his palm. "Take this," she said. "It belonged to our boy. I think he'd want you to have it."